mention that early and often. And again, I'm going to be letting folks in as we move along here. I just want to say thanks to all of you in the North Carolina Community College system, as well as Kathy. I've loved working with you all over the past year or so as one of the folks here at OpenLMS who works with North Carolina Community College system. And again, just letting some folks in. Just to share a bit about me, my name is Michael Vaughn. I'm an adoption education specialist with OpenLMS. Got about 15 years of ed tech experience, primarily in higher education. I've worked at a community college, worked at a really large state school, worked at a small private liberal arts college. So I lovingly say that I have higher ed bingo. That is how I explain it. I am kind of famous online. I have over 1.1 million followers across social media platforms. And you can track me down on LinkedIn. I'll put my LinkedIn link up on the very last slide of the meeting. I love presenting and training. I love talking about AI in particular. And probably my favorite thing that I get to do is be the father to two really incredible young girls over here. They just turned two, or our youngest turns two on Friday. Our oldest turned four last Friday. So makes it a little bit easier to remember their birthdays. Some of you may have had a chance to join yesterday for the AI ethics and L&D session where we talked about navigating privacy, fairness, and accountability when using generative AI tools. And we did talk about some of the new ethical dilemmas that emerge when you choose to use generative AI tools or AI-powered tools in general. Those are some lessons that I'll still be pulling into today's session, but I did want to reiterate one key message from yesterday's session, which is that with great power does come great responsibility. And the simplest way that I found to summarize that session is AI platforms and tools are really only as safe as their most dangerous users. I am going to talk about a couple of different technologies today related to generative AI or AI-powered tools that help improve workflows, especially in learning and development environments. So folks who are focused on teaching and learning, folks who are creating training sessions as an example, folks who are teaching in the classroom. Those technologies come with a few caveats just to make things a little bit simpler. The first thing that I would ask in terms of just some quick notes to keep in mind, try not to read everything. I know that sounds like a very silly request, but if I pull up ChatGPT a little bit later to talk about how one prompt versus another might get you a better result, my expectation is not that you read absolutely everything on the screen. Any web conferencing suite is going to make whatever's on screen that I'm sharing a little bit smaller anyway. So we're sort of in a spot where my expectation is that you don't read everything on the screen. It would be unreasonable to ask that. So I just want you to know that that is not an expectation of mine. Also, I want to point out that the examples that I'm giving today are not necessarily endorsements of these particular technologies. These are just chosen because they were excellent illustrative examples of what we're talking about. As an example, I will talk about Midjourney a little bit later today. I apologize. I'm doing some upper respiratory stuff today. It's I figured we would do this session on hard mode. I am going to show you Midjourney a little bit later today. We're going to generate an image live in this session together. That does not necessarily mean that I would say you should go out and get a subscription to Midjourney. There are certainly some challenges and qualms that come along with using a generative AI tool, especially one that generates images. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying, hey, Midjourney is the absolute best available. I just think it makes a strong example of what is currently possible and what will be possible in the future. Again, I'm going to be on doorbell duty, so you may see me bounce back and forth a little bit. But again, those are two things I just wanted you to keep in mind as we go into this. I don't expect you to read everything. And if I give an example of a specific tool or platform, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying you should go out and get this thing. Three things I would encourage you to think about when we talk about AI in general. This will be a quick refresher for those of you who were able to join yesterday. For those of you who weren't, hopefully this is a helpful starting point. But three quick things. The first is that when we talk about AI, we're talking about a type of app called an agent. An agent is an app that helps other apps run. The example that I gave yesterday was if you use the weather app on your phone, there is an agent app that runs behind the scenes that tracks your location as an example, because you want the most accurate weather for where you are right now. So AI is a type of agent that demonstrates a level of intelligence. That means that it thinks about problems or situations or challenges in the same way that you or I might. The second thing is that when AI is deployed into an environment to solve some sort of problem, typically how it works is it makes observations of data, it makes decisions based off of those observations, it then acts based off of those decisions. This is sort of like us when we do a jigsaw puzzle. Our environment is the tabletop. We observe the pieces, we decide when two of them fit together, and we act by moving them and placing them right next to one another. So that's the general idea there. The third is just a quick overview of like what ChatGPT and generative AI actually are, and they feel sort of magical when you use these technologies. Essentially, ChatGPT and other generative AI technologies are a very impressive math magic trick. The general idea behind what's going on is they're usually looking at vast pools of data. Still got a lot of folks coming in, I'm gonna see if I can get a colleague to help with doorbell duty. Um, Love the turnout though. This is really wonderful turnout for today. ChatGPT is a good example of what I mean by this when I say that a lot of generative AI is sort of like a magical math trick. ChatGPT in particular uses a form of AI called a large language model. And again, this will be a quick refresher for the folks yesterday, but for folks who are new, I think this is a helpful starting point. So, a large language model is a great example of how generative AI works because essentially how that works is they've given an AI a tremendously large data set of words, essentially like books, pages, writings, internet posts, things like that. And the AI has analyzed the relationship between all of the words in different contexts. What that means is if you're talking to a voice assistant like Siri and you say something like, I'm looking for a farm of me, Siri can go, those words have a very weak association with one another. They don't appear together very often. It's very weird that you would see those words. So, what are other words that sound the same but have a much stronger relationship? And the good example there would be I'm looking for a pharmacy. Those words have a much stronger relationship to one another. And that is essentially how AI is working when it's generating something new, whether it's an image, whether it's a text based around a prompt. ChatGPT in particular is just a conversational AI. It's set up in a chat style interface, so it makes you feel like you're talking to another person. But really, it's just a very complicated, very technical magic trick in terms of how it works. It is looking at mathematical relationships between words and using that to interpret your requests and also to generate its responses to your requests. So when we talk about exploring the AI landscape beyond ChatGPT, I think a very helpful starting point is going to be a little known platform called ChatGPT. And we're going to start here because A, it's the most accessible AI tool out there. And by accessible, I mean it's the easiest for folks to actually try. If you are using the Microsoft Edge browser, there is a built-in thing called Bing Chat, and Bing Chat is powered by OpenAI's ChatGPT platform. So if you ever want to try ChatGPT for free, Bing Chat is one way that you can do that. It's a slightly modified version of their model, but it's still an easy, approachable way for you to experiment with generative AI literally today, like literally as soon as the session is over, if you wanted to. If you are going to engage with a generative AI tool like ChatGPT, I think it's helpful to think about what your interactions are. And those interactions are almost always done through a series of prompting. So it's essentially you giving a command or a request to the platform, it interpreting that command, and then generating a response around it. I found that there are three things in particular that help me get better results from tools like ChatGPT. The first is, especially for text-based generators, is to use your words. And by that, I mean the more descriptive I am in my requests, the more likely I am to get a result that I am actually looking for. A quick example I would give is if one of you said, "Hey, Michael, can you cover my class? We're doing a quiz." I would have a bunch of questions for you. I would need to know, okay, when is the class? How long is the class? What room is it in? Where's the quiz? How long should the students have? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to just collect it? Do you want me to grade it? Do you want me to bring it back to you? There are a lot of follow-up questions there, and the same goes for interacting with ChatGPT. So if you give it an overly complex task all at once, you're probably not going to get a really great result. But if you are descriptive about what you specifically want, you can break that into smaller sections and say, okay, I want you to do this, then I want you to do this with the result, then do this with the result. You're going to start getting much better results. You are also going to get better results when you're interacting with a text based chat style AI if you play pretend. Role play is a very powerful way to interact with the generative AI tool like ChatGPT or, like the Google Bard. Microsoft right now is largely powering theirs off of OpenAI's platform, which is underlying ChatGPT. So when you interact with these, you can tell them to take on roles or you can take on a role while you are interacting with these services. And I'll show you an example of how I've done that here in just a moment, where I made a really basic request to ChatGPT. It gave me a result that was like, it was fine. It did okay. But then I was a bit more descriptive about what I wanted, and I asked it to take on the role of a specific type of person, and I got significantly better results. The third thing that I found that really, really helps when you're interacting with a tool like ChatGPT in general is to give examples. Sometimes I will ask it to do something and it will not do a very good job. If I can turn around though and give it an example of what I want it to do, it will do a significantly better job of correcting itself after the fact. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like as well. So what I want to do is I actually want to switch over to ChatGPT so we can take a quick look at that. You can get an idea. I'm going to make this text as large as possible, but at 190% zoom, things sometimes tend to not look as fantastic on the screen as they usually do. This is inside the ChatGPT desktop app. It is still running ChatGPT. A little bit earlier, I basically tried to not follow my own advice. I wasn't very descriptive. I didn't use any role play type scenario where I asked it to adopt a persona. I basically just said, hey, generate an outline for a 45-minute webinar. So generate an outline for a 45-minute webinar about micro learning. So I told it how long the webinar was, what it was about. I just asked it to generate an outline. And it did fine. It came up with an outline. It came up with time suggestions for what each section should be and what it should include. A lot of this felt a little bit more corporate focused. For example, measuring the impact and ROI of micro learning, that tends to be a little bit more corporate centric language, assessing the needs of your organization, right? When we come down here, there's not really much that focuses on the world of education or higher education. Did it do the job? It absolutely did. Yeah, it did a great job of, generating an outline based around what I asked it to do. But since I just said generate an outline for a 45-minute webinar about micro learning, that was all it had to go on. And so it gave me something that was fine. It'll work, but it's not like I'm not over the moon about it. Let's take that a step further. And I want to show you what happened when I followed my own advice. So instead of not giving it detail, I gave it a bit more detail about what it was, and I asked it to adopt a persona. So I told it, "You're an industry-leading expert in the field of learning and development with years of experience in higher education and a background in instructional design. You've been asked to deliver a 45-minute webinar on the topic of microlearning. Applying your expertise, develop an outline for this webinar." Did a significantly better job this time around. So it still broke things out by time, still broke them out into individual sections, but it adapted its content based around what I asked it to do, and it made it even better. For example, one thing that I really love is it worked in theoretical foundations. So here it's talking about the learning theories that underpin micro learning, like constructivism and spaced repetition. So if we're thinking about like repetition, spaced practice, learning principles that are well supported by neuroscience, by learning research. It was nice to see that make its way in there. There are also references, since I talked about higher education, about integrating with the learning management systems, right? The LMS. There were examples for corporate training in case this needed to be a little bit higher end, but also examples for micro learning and higher education that were built into the webinar. So something as simple as just giving it a bit more detail and asking it to adopt a persona led to significantly better results in terms of what I was asking for. So I found that to be really, really impressive. I also wanted to give you an example of giving it an example. And a little bit earlier, I asked it to just generate 10 factual multiple choice questions about Facebook. We'll actually talk about Facebook here in a minute, believe it or not, because they have their own ChatGPT competitor, which I believe is called Llama, which I think is hilarious. But theirs is open source. It's very interesting stuff. You can actually download and run it yourself. So I asked ChatGPT just very simply generate 10 factual multiple choice questions about Facebook. Now, let's say I'm teaching using the Moodle learning management system. I've got all these questions, all these answers. In any learning management system, if you're going to create a multiple choice question for a quiz, you are interacting with a form. That is how most learning management systems work. You fill out a form. The form is what is the question text? What are the responses the students could select? Which one's right? And then you add into the quiz. That is essentially what's gone on here. Now, for me to import this into Moodle, I could either enter it one by one, which would take a while, or I could use a special format called Aiken. And Aiken is basically just a way for me to format some of the questions that I have so that they could be. Let me pop over into my browser here. We'll come back in here. So we've got Aiken format. This is just the Moodle HQ wiki, which is openly licensed. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy some stuff out of here. Aiken questions just need to be formatted like this. So you have your question text on top, a list of all the questions, and then in all caps, what the answer is at the bottom. So I'm just going to copy all this about how to format things along with my examples. And I'm going to go back over to ChatGPT and say, here's some information about how to format questions in Aiken format to be imported into the Moodle LMS. Please reformat the questions you've generated into Aiken format. I paste in all that stuff that I found online. I'm going to give ChatGPT a chance to work. And you can see down here, it's literally generating in real time. Actually, it's already done. It was that fast. So it's already generated everything in Aiken format. All I would have to do at this point is just click the copy button, throw it into a text document, save it, throw it in Moodle. I'm all done. So this is a simple way to take, even if you have some questions that you've written that are in, let's say, Microsoft Word or something like that, you want an easy way to import them into the LMS. All of a sudden, this becomes a really powerful tool for doing that. And all I had to do was just give it a couple examples of what I wanted, and it just did it fantastically. When I originally asked it for those multiple choice questions, it didn't even tell me what the correct answer was in the questions that it generated. It put them in a separate section below there. And once I told it how to format the questions, it reformatted everything perfectly. So all the same questions that you saw above are now perfectly listed here, ready to be copied and pasted and imported in. So there's some really simple ways that you can get even more out of ChatGPT. And we're actually going to loop back to ChatGPT a couple more times a little bit later because let me get over to Keynote. There are ways that you can use it to interact with additional platforms. So this is why I'm talking about it, because quite frankly, it's a really nice introduction into how we can interact and use some other tools. If you are going to engage with generative AI for part of the writing process, especially in a learning and development environment where maybe you're using it to help you with course objectives or generate summaries of articles or content that you've created, your role needs to shift just a little bit. The general idea is you are using AI less so as a writer and more so as an editor. And you are all experts in your field. You're capable of critically evaluating someone's writing, providing feedback and suggestions for revision. This is essentially how tools like ChatGPT work. They can produce an outcome, and then you can provide that feedback back to it to revise what it has come up with to make it a little bit closer to what you want. So if I ask it to generate some multiple choice questions about Facebook, and then I ask it to reformat those questions in a specific format so that I can then easily import them into the LMS without having to fill out a form a couple of times, that is exactly what we're talking about. So it's shifting more over to an editor role. Another way to put this is working with AI in general means you are shifting from being a musician to being a director or conductor. I don't know anyone who assumes that the conductor of the orchestra knows nothing about music, even though they're using very simple and effective gestures. So the idea here is you are applying your expertise to use a tool to do something faster or to take something that might be a bit cumbersome and do it a little bit more efficiently. So you do interact with ChatGPT through text. You also interact with other services that generate AI created content like images or videos, typically through text based prompts. And I will say that the AI that you use for text is not the same as the AI that you use for images. With ChatGPT, I would treat it more conversational, like you were explaining it to another person what you want them to do and what you want them to create. If I am using a tool that generates images, I would actually think of it more so like those little plaque cards at the art museum where you sometimes get like a really staccato description of the work, but that is perfect for a service like Midjourney that can generate AI image or use AI to generate images based around prompts that you provide. In fact, if I put these two images side by side, can we get some guesses in the chat which one was created by AI? One of these is real and one of these is not. There we go. All right, I'm seeing a lot of very correct answers. Yes, the generated image is over on the right. You can tell it's a little soft, almost artistic. One thing that helps with this image is you can tell like it's a little lower quality image, which tends to happen when you actually take the photo yourself. So the left is a stock photo, the right was generated by Midjourney a little bit earlier today. One thing that I find kind of fascinating is if you shrink these photos down, you end up in what I call like the skim paradox because the image is fake, but if it's small enough, you tend to skim right by it and your brain will just assume that it's real. Like if you were to take the time and critically analyze it, you would probably realize there are some things wrong with this image, or it just doesn't look quite right. But if it's small enough, you tend to skim right by. Meta actually is going to be addressing this in a couple of months on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, which is their Twitter competitor, by automatically detecting and labeling AI generated images that were created by other companies. By the way, this is going to be a little hard to see, but I talked about this yesterday for a brief moment. Sometimes people ask, like, how often do you have to update this presentation? And the core of this presentation was done in fall. The core updates to this presentation for the North Carolina Community College system was done last week. I have had to update this almost every day since then because things keep changing. This announcement from Meta that they were going to begin detecting and labeling AI generated images is about 4 or 5 hours old. So when this says today at 9:39 a.m., I mean, I literally took this screenshot about 2 hours ago to add it into this presentation, just to let you know that because these services are so compelling, Meta is now going to be labeling them moving forward. Now, when you use it to create an image, you can do all kinds of really interesting things. And while it can kind of come close to photorealism, it also does a really nice job of mimicking artistic styles. So, one prompt that I've used in the past is this one: botanical illustration, types of tulips, white background, style of Pierre Joseph Rideau. This was a French artist and botanist. He made these beautiful pictures of basically flowers and botanical specimens that he would find. And the one on the left is an example of his work. The one on the right is Midjourney's attempt from several months ago at recreating what that looks like. And even though there are certainly some generative issues like this stem coming out of nowhere in this leaf, which is certainly kind of bizarre to have something like that happen, the artistic style, like the way that these are quote unquote drawn, is very similar to how they were done by the original artist. So the ability to copy artistic styles certainly raises a lot of ethical issues, especially for modern artists who have spent years and years developing their artistic style. I feel a little bit more comfortable with older styles for folks whose work has been in the public domain for quite a while. But it's still worth noting that it can duplicate artistic styles. For those of you who weren't in yesterday's session, one example that I've been giving of just how powerful this technology is becoming is something I'm about to share with you. It is not necessarily about what is possible right now. It is where was it like a year or two ago, and where is it now, so that you can see the dramatic distance that it's come in a very short period of time. This is built off of an experiment that was started by someone on Reddit in the Midjourney subreddit, and I picked it up and just kept running with it because I thought it was really interesting. So in April of 2022, they gave Midjourney, which was I think on version 2 at that point, a prompt to generate an image of a man. And I don't know the exact prompt offhand, but this was the image that was generated in April 2022. And again, I won't belabor the point because there are certainly some definite inaccuracies from a biological standpoint. For example, having two ears that are smaller than they should be and also on the same side of the head. This yellow dot is meant to actually be the sun. It was directed to, add some natural light from the sun in the prompt, and instead, this was the sun. That was what it generated. The hair is very flat. It's not really textured. The clothing is muddy. It's really weird. So this user took the same prompt a year later in April 2023 and had Midjourney's newer model, which was Midjourney 4 at that point, regenerate the image. And it jumped up to this level of quality in just a year. I took the same prompt and had it regenerate the image in September of 2023, so just about 4 months ago, and this is what the current version of Midjourney does with that prompt. It is a remarkable leap in quality in less than a year and a half, which is why I mentioned this technology. So there are certainly going to be some examples that I'm literally going to share with you in just a few moments where it definitely struggles. And it's going to be very obvious that something is AI generated. But this image to me, I joke that like if you threw a Dior logo on this, I would be convinced it was a clone ad from like a magazine or something like that. It's very well done. The hair's well done. The clothing's well done. The hair has beautiful texture. Like it all makes sense. It's a good looking guy, and this does make me worry about catfishing scams and things like that moving forward. But my larger point is we've gone from the left to the right in less than a year and a half. I also took the same prompt and regenerated the image in November of last year. So just about what 2-3 months ago at this point. I can't believe it's February. I don't know how we got to February because we were on like January 45th and just we made it. But just a couple of months ago, I had regenerate again, and this was the image that I came up with. And the reason I'm sharing this is, I kind of liked the last image a little bit better, but the clothing, like the quality of the clothing, I hope this comes through on the web conferencing, but the fuzz from the cloth is visible. Like that was actually generated in this image when the prompt was run through. This is probably the best clothing that I've ever seen AI generate. It's not just the hair, the facial features, or anything like that. This is some of the best natural clothing that I have seen an AI come up with. Now, part of the trick that comes along with this is you could certainly use these tools longer term to start generating custom bespoke images for training environments. And so if I just asked for, a multicultural group of folks in a training room, it will essentially generate 4 images at a time when I ask it to. And then I can pick one of these to either generate variations of it or make it a little bit larger. And again, this is the skimmable problem, is what I call it, because from a distance, it's a little bit smaller, like it would be on a phone screen. Most of these pass the glance test. They all seem genuine, like actual just airbrush stock photos, and they are not. If we pick the one in the top left to zoom in on, there are a couple of issues. Like there's no MacBook logo. This person's hands connect, so literally his hands are like one big loop. And magically, like even though he's got shorter hair, here, let me pop back. This hair came out of nowhere. This woman's hands are literally blending into the table. So if you are ever worried about AI, always look at the eyes, always look at the face, always look at hands and feet. Those are usually the biggest tells that something has been AI generated, right? And even like you'll see like this hand seems like a little bit smaller than it should be in terms of how someone's face is. You can see like it doesn't do the best job with faces. Actually, those faces are pretty good, but you can see like a little distortion with the eye. Typically, you will see eyes looking in different directions. So this is essentially what you'll run into with AI in its current form, something like Midjourney in its current form. But again, it generates images that generally will pass a glance test. And what I like about it is it can also generate artistic styles like we talked about earlier. So I had regenerate the same image around the same prompt and actually came up with one that was sort of illustrated. And is it perfect? Definitely not. There are a couple of issues. I'm not sure what happened in the back here. Went a little Picasso on us. Some of the faces were just not rendered properly. There's probably only one in here where the face actually looks like it was rendered okay. But eventually this problem will be fixed, and it does pass the glance test. And you can also ask it to generate variations around a theme. So I asked it to generate variations around that image, and it generated four more images that were built around that theme. And some of those were even better. There's still some distorted issues. I think there's a zombie in this training meeting, which some of you might be thinking that's how I feel in meetings. And you know what? That more power to you. It's vibes. But some of these are actually rendered pretty well, right? Some of the faces actually look pretty normal. And the idea that you could generate your own images on demand and have them thematically linked instead of having to pay, thousands of dollars to Getty for stock photos or something like that is a really incredible tool to potentially have access to in the future. Now, if you were in yesterday's session, one of the things I talked about as a challenge with AI is the presence of bias. So when bias is present in the data used to train the AI, that will become exponentially amplified in the results of what you get from an AI output. And Midjourney is no different. I gave Midjourney an incredibly simple prompt, and I ran that prompt through 10 times over. And when I say I ran that prompt, I meant it generated four new images every single time I ran that prompt through. And the prompt was just a photorealistic portrait style photo of a woman. That was the whole prompt. And again, every time it runs, it generates four images. These are 9 of the 10. I would have put all 10 on here, but it didn't fit in a way that looked aesthetically nice. But I'm wondering if you can find any similarities between these images and also just a general observation of who may have been left out. Also, it's worth knowing that I think less than 2% of the population genetically ends up with red hair. So 40% representation in here for redheads. So anyone with those recessive gene traits, unite. But this was literally me just running the exact same prompt. It was a photorealistic style photo of a woman 10 times over. This happened every single time. So bias does exist in the data. If you want to have, a diversity within your images, as an example, you will have to specifically ask for it. You will have to be deliberately asking something like Midjourney to incorporate it in there. I do think that Midjourney still has a bit of potential moving forward. I am excited about that potential. I do think it would be worth taking a very brief look at Midjourney. I'm actually going to pop over to ChatGPT because you can train ChatGPT to help you generate images. So I have followed my own advice, given ChatGPT some examples of how things can be formatted. And again, don't expect you to read everything, but I gave it, some examples of what things would look like to write out a prompt. And I told it how I wanted to format things. There are certain parameters that need to be added, like AR 16:9 means I want an aspect ratio of 16:9, which is a widescreen format, like how you watch movies. And then I asked it to create a detailed prompt of what the Smoky Mountains would look like if they were drawn or painted by Bob Ross. So I've got a prompt here that generated. I've never run this through. We are going to hop over to Discord, which is it's basically a chat style app where you can create different communities, and it's pretty popular with the kids these days. I am going to use this to interact with Midjourney. Midjourney only works as an app within Discord right now. So I just need to tell it I want to type a prompt. I'm going to paste in that prompt from ChatGPT. We're going to let it run through, and then it will start generating the image. So we're just kind of waiting to start right here. It ends up getting queued up. But I did request it be turbo mode, so it'll start to move pretty quickly. If you were like me and you grew up and you didn't have internet, and then suddenly the internet was there, but it was dial up, this is going to feel very familiar to your AOL dial up days, like getting the floppy disk from the grocery store so you can get your AOL free trial for the sixth time. So it's going to gradually load in here as it's improving. So this one's moving through, and this is how quickly it can generate an image based around a theme. And now it's done. So these are the 4 images that it came up with. It does feel a bit Bob Rossi style, I would say, especially the one in the bottom left and the bottom right. But that is essentially how easy it can be to generate an image. I love that even though I'm not great at writing some of the prompts for Midjourney, I can offload some of that work to ChatGPT since I'm already using ChatGPT, and it helps do some of that for me. So some of these services start to work really, really well together. If I wanted one in particular that I was like, oh, that one, the bottom right, I really love it. It's giving me some good nostalgic feels. I can just upscale it a bit. And what it will do is give me a chance to make it twice as detailed and make it a little bit larger. So again, that'll take probably about, if I had to guess, 45 to 60 seconds to run, but this is how quickly AI can generate an image at this point. It's pretty incredible just how quickly it comes together. So just waiting for that to update so we can get a little preview image, get a better idea of how it might show up. And we can always abandon this and then come back to it later. Pardon me. But it does move pretty quickly. Now, the reason I try and balance what does work really well with what some of the ethical considerations are is I do want to make sure that we're being fair here when we talk about some of these tools. That said, I do think that while generative AI tools like ChatGPT, like Midjourney, deserve an awful lot of scrutiny because of how they are created, because of how they are used, I would also encourage you to think about AI powered tools in terms of the potential that they could provide, because we could hire more people, we can expand programs, we can buy software and services. The one thing that no one on this call can buy is time. We cannot get that. It's just not possible. So, what I love about AI is where it really excels. And where it excels is speeding up tasks that historically take you and I an awful lot of time. If you or a friend hired someone to build a deck and they showed up and they started turning in the screws with a hand screwdriver, you would be a little upset by that, right? Because this is going to take ages. It makes no sense to put in these really important screws that are going to hold the deck together with a handheld screwdriver. You would think nothing of them using an electric drill because it's a more efficient tool that's going to get the job done faster and just as well. And I look at AI powered tools the same way. A great example of where you can take AI powered tools to speed up historically cumbersome processes would be in making content more accessible for learners. And there are some really cool examples of that that are emerging right now. ChatGPT has augmented itself with an image recognition service now. They also have their own image generator, but it's surprisingly good. Microsoft had a mobile app that I had used from time to time called Seeing AI. It's currently an iOS only app, but if you have photos on your phone, you can send it to Seeing AI and it tries to analyze what it's looking at. I find that to be really helpful if I need a caption or alt text for an image. But just for giggles, I gave ChatGPT an image. This is a stock photo that I had pulled from a site called Pexels, and I just said, "Please describe this image." It said the image depicts the back of a referee who is wearing a black and white striped shirt. On the back of the shirt, there's a large letter U. The referee is also wearing a black cap. In the blurred background, there seems to be a crowd, possibly spectators at a sports event with visible red and yellow colors. Absolutely perfect description. There was no prior prompting there. I literally just upload the image. I asked it to describe it, and that was what it came up with out of the box. So I know sometimes when we use images, it is difficult to come up with descriptions for those images for our learners who might be blind or visually impaired. This is, I think, something that is going to become much easier over time as image recognition software improves through the use of AI. There are also other tools out there that I see a lot of value in from a course design development perspective. One of those is if you do have a student who has a severe visual impairment or maybe a total blindness, they are very likely using a screen reader to read course content. There are services available out there. I mentioned one yesterday that will essentially allow you to upload recordings of your voice and it will develop an AI approximation of your voice. So they will synthesize it. And then you can give that service text and it will read it aloud in your voice. It won't say or it won't cough. Right now, my voice is still a bit scratchy. I woke up right around 4 this morning with a scratchy throat and a dry cough, and then of course at 11:07, our oldest preschool sent out a message through the Bright Wheel app to remind us that we give them half their money or half of our money, and they give us a new disease to try every week. So this update was that our daughter had been exposed to someone who tested positive for COVID. So that's fun to think about. So right now, recording audio is not really at the top of my list. But if I needed to offload some of that work to a service like this 11 Labs Prime Voice AI service, I think it's called Speech Synthesis as well, then I have text in my course that is read aloud in my voice rather than in a generic screen reader voice. That means that if I have non-traditional students who are on the go and they want to listen to course content as a podcast, they can hear it in an approximation of my voice without me having to carve any extra time out of my day to generate that. That also means that if I have learners who are using a screen reader, they now have narrated text in approximation of my voice rather than something more robotic that you would get in JAWS or NVDA. That makes things a bit more personal and I think boosts the level of presence that an instructor can have in a course like an online course. This is a mainstream technology. I know it doesn't seem like it. Some of you may be hearing about this for the first time. This is a mainstream technology. It is officially available on tens of millions of devices. If you have an iPhone 12 or newer, Apple rolled out a feature in September of this year called Personal Voice. This is a new accessibility feature where you essentially read 150 phrases, takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and then whenever your phone is on the charger, it will process all of your voice recordings to create an approximation of your voice that you can then use in voice and video calls. And I'm curious to see, usually what they do when they roll out new features like this is they keep it tightly locked down for a year or two, and then they start to expand access so that other apps, if you choose, could use that voice for something like text to speech. I find that to be really, really fascinating. One of the other things that I love from an accessibility standpoint is generating transcripts. So that is a time consuming process. If you record video for class, if you record a screencast, it takes a while to generate a transcript. That part is not very fun. So, what could we do instead? There is a technology that I use, a little known service that you may not have heard of, and it's called Microsoft Word. And this is what I use to transcribe all of our training videos. It is important enough to me as part of my workflow that I literally pay like $7 a month for the Office 365 subscription because we are a G Suite company. But if you create a video, you should be able to export the audio as its own individual file. Inside Word, there is a dictation feature, but there's also a little menu hidden underneath it that is very, very easy to miss. And in that menu is a transcription option. So you can upload your audio file and it will use its speech to text features to turn that audio into text. What I love about this is it identifies multiple speakers. So if you're having a back and forth, like one of the transcriptions I had to create was for a chat that Amy and I had for, I think it was one of the EdTech chat webinars. And it recognized when Amy was speaking, it recognized when I was speaking, and I just had to edit the name and that updated throughout the entire document. You can then copy the text with timestamps if you wanted to into the document. I usually just copy the text itself. And now I've got a word processor that I've been using for well over a decade, probably 2 or 3 at this point, that is very, very comfortable for me to use so that I can update all of that information in a way that's pretty simple. Because again, text to speech, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have to change some things. And every once in a while, it thinks that I've ended a sentence when I haven't. But it's much faster than it would be if I were stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting to code this all by hand. If you've never done audio transcription or seen people who are paid to do that as a service, they literally have a foot pedal like it's a sewing machine, and that foot pedal stops and starts the video so that they can type what they've just heard, pause the video, or I'm sorry, play the video, pause it, and then type what they just heard again. And this is just DIY out of the box Very easy to work with, very approachable, and a great example of how AI is being incorporated into familiar tools to make workflows easier and better. Want to give you a couple more examples of what we're looking at when we talk about this. So, oh, did it? I think it may have closed a little bit earlier. No worries. I'm going to open it right back up right now. This is one of my favorite examples of how AI can be incorporated into existing tools. Of course, I need to restart to get a brand new version of the software. I only checked for an update 2 hours ago just to make sure that we were all set. So we're getting the latest and greatest here with, I'm sure, a little onboarding panel that'll pop up when I try and do something. Uh, this is a video editor called Descript. And when we talk about learning and development, when we talk about teaching and learning, when we talk about creating educational course content, video is a really powerful medium. The trick, though, is video editing is usually a bit of a challenge. If you work in a sort of teaching and learning center or an ed tech center, or department at your campus, and you've worked with faculty to try and train them on how to record videos and how to record screencasts, I guarantee that you have run into an instructor who is cursed with perfectionism, and they will have one slip up in a video and they want to re-record the entire thing from the very beginning. If you are accustomed to editing video, what you know is that if you get to a point where you mess up, essentially you snap your fingers, and then that wasn't a very good snap. Hang on. My fingers are so dry. Hang on. Okay, close enough. So you snap your fingers or you do some kind of click, and then you know to look for that in the audio waveform when you're editing the video. So you know where to cut out just that part, and then you just start over from the paragraph or section where you had initially messed up. There are some folks who will literally re-record an entire video if they mess up because they don't know about the video editing piece. The thing is, when you talk to folks about how to edit video, it is not an it's not a very approachable skill. It feels very overwhelming. It's an interface that's unlike anything else that you use on a regular basis, and because of that, it can feel a little awkward. For example, a really common thing that you do in video editing is something called slicing, where you have a video track, and if you want part of it out, you have to slice it. And they call it slicing because literally when you had the old physical rolls of film, like in the film studios, the physical rolls of film, they would slice them to cut out the parts that they didn't want. And so that has persisted. That is like a really core skill for video editing, but again, it can feel really overwhelming to people if they don't know how to do that. So what I love about Descript is it's using AI to make some of these options or some of these editing features a bit more straightforward. I'm going to load in a demo project here. And before I do that, I just want to call out a couple of things. So one is there's a timeline down here with the video. And this is typically what most people are used to when they are editing video. They'll see like a timeline of video, a waveform with the audio, and this is where they slice and cut out parts of the video that they don't want. This can feel really overwhelming to a new user, someone who is not accustomed to editing video. So I'm actually just going to hide that entirely. One thing that Descript does with AI is something that we just talked about. It uses AI to turn audio into text. So this is a generated transcript right here of the audio in the video. And in this part of the video, the speaker actually messes up. So she started off saying, "Hi, everyone, it's Tiff, and welcome back to my kitchen." And then she said, "I don't smile like that in real life. Why don't I?" And then she starts over, "Hey, everyone, it's Tiff, and welcome back to my kitchen." So, if we let this play through, I don't know if the audio goes through. I think it does. So you can tell that there's clearly part of that she would want to clip out. If this were traditional video editing, we would go into the timeline, we would find that spot in the video, we would slice, we would find the end, we would slice, we would delete out that part. In Descript, since it's generated a transcript, essentially all you do is you select the text that you want to cut out and you delete it, and that automatically edits the video. So now the video is just dead simple. They have made video editing as simple as editing a Word document just by using AI. And I find it to be a very, very clever application. And that is not all that happens in this app. Again, this is like a freemium app, and me using it as an example is not necessarily an endorsement. I personally have enjoyed using it, but to each their own. If you've got your own workflows with a video editor, stick with it. But there are some other things that you can do in here that I find to be really fascinating. One is a little uncanny right now, but long term, I think it's going to be really, really helpful. And that is, especially if you've worked with folks who are recording video, sometimes they are very obviously reading from a transcript. Like you can tell that I am not making eye contact with the camera in this video clip. Like, it's very obvious that I'm reading off of the screen. So there's a really cool feature in Descript that is AI powered. I'm essentially going to select this text. I don't have to select the whole paragraph. It'll just do it. And it's called eye contact. And what we'll do is it will use AI to literally change the image of my eyes to create eye contact with the screen. The reason why I say this is not fully ready for prime time, but you can see where it's going, is because when someone stares at the camera the entire time without actually breaking eye contact, it starts to feel a little less personal. It starts to feel a lot more creepy. And that is a little problematic. But what I will do is I'm just going to resize this a little bit. Like we'll actually zoom out a bit to try and make this a little larger. So right now I'm not looking at the screen. I'm going to enable eye contact. And now I am looking at the screen. So if we hide that, we'll make this a little bit larger. So this is AI making me look at the screen. And you can see it does not break, and that's really my concern with it right now. So that's my general concern with it. I feel like it needs to at least reflect natural behavior, which is occasionally not working. So I think that that is helpful. I know that there are some folks that we work with who need a script. They need a script, but then it becomes very obvious that they are looking at a script instead of looking at the camera. It feels a little less personal. So this is one of those simple ways that AI can be applied to solve a common problem. Again, I don't know if this feature is totally ready for prime time, but I certainly like where it's headed. And I think that it's really, really interesting. I'll also share another feature that I find to be lovely. And again, I don't know if you all can hear the sound when I play through these, but hopefully you can, because otherwise this next example is going to be a little rough. The general idea here is okay, so it sounds like sound is not going through, which is kind of a bummer. You know, what can you do? Um, Let me stop presenting for a second and see if there's a way to reshare. No, I would have to share a tab. Let's see if I. And sorry, because the script does actually have a browser tool. All right, I won't be able to share the audio. I'm so sorry about that. Hopefully, it'll be caught in the recording, but we will see. Essentially, what happens is throughout recording, what happens is you sometimes say you sometimes say I was on a parenting podcast. We were talking about a couple of different things, but we were also talking about sharenting accounts where parents like really kind of exploit their kids for views and clout and money. And you know, by posting sometimes deeply personal moments of their kids in really compromising positions. So in that, I was having a normal conversation. I had some uhs and ums that showed up in there. And what I love about the script is I can actually right click on those, and there's a replace option. It's kind of disappearing as soon as I try and zoom in. But there's a replace option, and I can either overdub those words, so it can use an AI approximation of my voice to make that voice sound like something else. The other thing that I can do is there's an option to remove filler words. So if I remove filler words, my preference is to delete and replace them with a gap. They could just delete, so it just cuts out every time you say or any type of filler word in there. I like delete and replace with gap instead, because essentially what it does is instead of me saying something like this, it would take out the and it would put in a natural pause that makes it sound more like I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next in a really thoughtful way, right? So that's a really simple way to get some of that out. I feel like it might have been Janelle that had brought it up yesterday, like just loving to get the ums and uhs out of the videos that you record. This is literally a built-in feature that you can do by default. This does require like a higher tier subscription for using it. But the way that it does it, and I'm so sorry you can't hear the audio on this one because it's remarkably compelling how easy it is for this to work. So whenever you have these ums and uhs, when it takes them out, it does just a beautiful job of inserting a pause instead. So it makes you sound more thoughtful than just someone who's using filler language without realizing. That is not all that this could do. Again, this is really, I think, changing up how people think about video editing. This is still a video editor interface. I can still select text in here and delete things out if I don't want them. But there are plenty of AI actions that are built in as well, like an Ask AI feature that can do a couple of different things. So if you have some of those really obvious retakes in your video, I mentioned earlier that like if you do a lot of video, you've probably become accustomed to you mess up, you snap your fingers, so there's a spike on the waveform, and then you start over again. It can identify that because it transcribes all the audio, and it can automatically remove all of the retakes from the video by using AI to analyze the content and just take it out. It can edit the video for clarity. So if you're getting a little wibbly wobbly with your explanations and things like that, it will make its best approximation. What I love is it can add chapters or markers so that when you share this video, it's a little bit easier for your end users to navigate. And there are even prompts in here to have it summarize your video for social media posts. So it can automatically generate, if you're recording something that's going to be published on the college's LinkedIn account, you can have it suggest titles for videos. You can have it write sample social media posts and blog posts. You can have it summarize the video so you have a description for something like YouTube, and you're just all set. It's a really clever way to incorporate AI into something that is typically cumbersome and a little bit challenging for most folks. And make it much simpler to use. So when I think about the role of AI in general, and not just generative AI, this is a lot of what I see being really impactful for folks because it's taking some things that either feel really intimidating to new users or that can be really cumbersome, like editing out all of the retakes in a video and streamlining them through the use of AI. And those are the things that I think I am most excited about moving forward. So, with all that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and put our final slide up here. I talked about this a lot at the beginning of yesterday's session, but I know that the audio was a bit rough. So, just to reiterate, we have our Academy site. It's academy.openlms.net. If you visit that site and you look at our list of courses, there is a no cost resource course. It'll be called The Rise of AI and ChatGPT, but a lot of resources for this session, resources for yesterday's session, they will all be in that course. If you don't have an account on our site, that's fine. You just buy the no cost resource course for $0. That creates an account that enrolls you into the course, that gets you access to all those resources. If you missed yesterday's session, one of the things that we talked about was literally a sample generative AI use policy that you can use as a framework for your own. There's a document with a list of questions that you can ask a vendor who uses AI. That if you're in the RFP process, you can challenge them a bit and say, hey, how do you make sure that your results don't have copyrighted content in them? Who's liable if there's a copyright claim against content that your service generates? Things like that. So we want to definitely encourage you to reach out there. I've also got Amy's LinkedIn here. I've got my LinkedIn here. Please do consider keeping in touch with us. We'd love to stay in touch with you. But did want to reiterate those no cost resources there. So we are running up on time. I think we've got maybe 15 seconds left. I'll stick around to see if there are any questions like that, but I did want to say genuinely thank you so much for attending. We had excellent attendance today. We had excellent persistence, folks who just stayed through the end. And I can't tell you how much that means to me. Sometimes people just drop out really quickly, and it's so nice that you stayed. So thank you, and I hope you all have a really good rest of the day. I am not sure how the copy of the recording is, being distributed. I wanna say there's gonna be a follow-up email. Oh, perfect. Lacey, right on the money there. Love it. And thank you all so much for the kind words. I really do appreciate it. And Lacey, I'll get you a copy of that recording. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. I'm not seeing any other questions roll through.